Morning in the village of Avenel always began the same way, with the sound of water. The river ran through the heart of the town, silver and endless, curling around cobblestone paths and willow trees that bent low to kiss its surface. To most, it was simply the rhythm of life, water for washing, fishing, and reflection. But to one man, the river was everything. His name was Aaron Vale, and for 40 years, he had lived beside that river, in a small wooden cottage with blue shutters and a broken lantern hanging by the door. Every morning, before the mist had even lifted from the fields, Aaron would walk barefoot to the water's edge, his old net slung over his shoulder. He wasn't a rich man. His hands were rough, his back bent, and his clothes smelled faintly of salt and smoke. Yet there was a quiet dignity to him, a steadiness that made even the river seem to slow down when he arrived. The people of Avenel often said, "When Aaron walks, the river listens." No one remembered when that saying began. Perhaps it started after the accident, the one that had taken his wife, at least 20 years ago. They had been young once, inseparable, always laughing, always walking hand in hand along the riverside. Elise was a singer, her voice soft as the wind through reeds. She sang to the river every evening, her songs drifting across the water until even the fish seemed to pause and listen. But one spring night, after a heavy rain, the river rose higher than it ever had before. Elise had gone out to gather her washing from the stones, and the current, swift and merciless, had pulled her away before anyone could reach her. The search went on for days. When they finally found her shawl caught in the reeds downstream, the villagers built a small shrine by the water and said prayers for her soul. But Aaron never stopped coming back, day after day. Year after year, he returned to the same spot where the current had taken her. He cast his net, though he rarely cared what it brought. Some days he caught fish, some days driftwood. Once, a rusted locket. He kept them all. "Everything the river gives," he would say quietly, "has a reason." The villagers pitied him, of course. They whispered that grief had made him strange, that he talked to the river as if it were alive. But no one ever laughed at him. Not after that first year, when something remarkable began to happen. Every evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Aaron would sit by the water and hum. The melody was simple, the same song Elise used to sing. And then, faintly, the river would echo it back. Not in words, not in sound exactly, but in rhythm. The ripples formed in time with the tune, the water trembling as though stirred by invisible hands. The first time it happened, Aaron froze, his heart thundering in his chest. He leaned closer to the water, his reflection wavering, and whispered, "Elise." Only the river answered, a soft swirl of mist and a sigh of wind, but that was enough. From that night onward, Aaron sang to the river every dusk. Sometimes he spoke aloud, telling it about the day, about the weather, about how the bakery had changed hands, or how the mayor's son had married. Other times he just sat in silence, watching the play of moonlight on the waves. And though the river never truly spoke back, it always seemed to remember. When he was sad, the water ran gently as if in mourning. When he smiled, it glittered brighter than before. To Aaron, that was more than coincidence. It was faith. One spring morning, 20 years after Elisa's death, the sky looked much the same as it had on that fateful day, pale, heavy with rain. The willows bent low, their branches brushing the water like fingers reaching for something lost. Aaron stood by the shore, staring at the reflection of his own weathered face. His beard had turned white, his eyes gray like the sky, but his heart, that stubborn heart, still beat with the same love. He whispered softly, "It's been 20 years, Elise. You'd laugh to see me now. Still fishing, still talking to the water like an old fool." The river flowed quietly. A few bubbles rose to the surface and popped. "I know you're there," he said. "Somewhere in the current. I can feel it. The river doesn't forget." He threw his net one last time before the rain began to fall. When he pulled it back in, he found something tangled inside. Not fish, but a smooth glass bottle, old and worn. Sealed with wax dot inside was a piece of folded parchment. Aaron's breath caught. He hadn't seen handwriting like that in 2 decades, but even through the fogged glass, he knew Dot it was hers, Elise's. The river had remembered. He carried it home, his hands trembling so badly that he nearly dropped it twice. By the time he reached his cottage, the rain had begun to fall in earnest, heavy, rhythmic, like the sound of footsteps returning after a long journey. Aaron set the bottle on the table, lit a candle, and stared at it in silence. He was afraid to open it, afraid that the ink might have faded, that the words inside might not be hers at all. Dot, but more than anything, he was afraid of what it might say, afraid that, after all these years, the river was finally ready to speak. The candlelight trembled in the small cottage as Aaron stared at the bottle, his reflection flickering in the glass like a ghost caught between two worlds. Outside, rain whispered against the windows, a soft, endless murmur that seemed to carry a voice he had not heard in decades. He sat at the table for a long while, the bottle resting before him, cold and slick with river water. His hands, those rough, calloused hands that held nets and mended lines for 40 years, hesitated like those of a frightened child. Then, slowly, he reached for the cork. Dot, it came loose with a soft sigh, like a secret being released. Aaron tipped the bottle, and a folded, water-stained letter slid gently into his palm. The paper was fragile, yellowed, and frayed at the edges. The moment he touched it, his chest tightened, a flood of memory rushing through him. Elise's laughter in the sunlight, her fingers tracing songs in the air, her hair catching in the wind by the riverside. The handwriting on the page was hers. Slanted, delicate, alive, Aaron's eyes blurred as he read. "My dearest Aaron, if the river carries this to you, it means I am gone, or perhaps only lost for a while. I write this as the waters rise. I am not afraid, only sorry I must leave you without a proper goodbye. The river is not cruel, Aaron. It remembers. It carries everything we give it, our songs, our sorrows, even our love. Promise me you won't curse it. Promise you'll listen when it calls. If there is a way to find me again, it will be through the current. It knows the path between us. Yours forever, Elise." The words blurred as tears fell onto the page. Aaron pressed the letter to his chest, his breath shuddering. For years he had begged the river for a sign, for something, anything, to prove that Elise's spirit lingered in the waters she had loved so deeply. Now the river had spoken. He didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, listening to the rain until dawn, the letter safe beside the candle. Every drop against the roof sounded like a whisper, every gust of wind like her voice caught in the reeds. And when morning came, the air outside was clear, still wet but brighter, as if the world had washed itself clean. The river ran calm again, glinting silver in the soft light. Aaron stepped outside, the letter folded neatly in his pocket. He walked to the water's edge and said softly, "I got your message, Elise. I hear you." That day, something strange began to happen. The river changed Dot at first. It was only a feeling, a warmth beneath the surface, as though the water carried a pulse. Then came the sound, faint but unmistakable. A melody dotted drifted through the air like the gentlest hum, rising and falling with the current. Aaron froze. His heart pounded. Dot. He knew that tune. Dot. It was her song. Dot. The one she used to sing at twilight. He took a trembling step closer to the water. "Elise?" He whispered. Dot. The river rippled. A sudden breeze passed through the willows, and the leaves rustled in rhythm, echoing her melody. Aaron closed his eyes. For a moment, it was as if she were standing beside him again, her soft voice wrapping around his like sunlight on skin. The melody continued, clear now, flowing with the water itself. He fell to his knees by the riverbank, overwhelmed by something too vast to name, grief, joy, awe, and fear all at once. The river had remembered her song. Word spread quickly through Avenel. "The river sings again," people whispered in the market. "Old Aaron has made it weep for his wife." Some came to hear it for themselves, travelers, children, even the mayor's wife. They all stood in silence at dusk, when the air grew still and the water began to hum. But to Aaron, it wasn't a performance. It was a conversation. He began to talk to the river more than ever before, sometimes aloud, sometimes only in thought. He told it about the letter, about how much he still missed her, about the ache that never left his heart. And sometimes the river answered, a sudden flash of silver fish when he spoke her name, a swirl of current when he sang her song, a faint echo like a sigh whenever he said, "I love you." Weeks passed. The letter remained on the mantel, framed beneath glass. The townsfolk treated Aaron with new reverence now, not as a broken old man, but as someone touched by something divine. Children brought him flowers from the fields. Strangers left candles by his cottage. They said the river was a miracle, that it had chosen him as its keeper. But Aaron didn't believe in miracles. He believed in Elise, and he believed in promises. Then, one evening, as he sat by the river humming softly, a voice startled him. "Excuse me," it said. Aaron turned. A young woman stood a few feet away. She was about 20, with pale hair tied in a loose braid and eyes the color of the water itself, gray-blue and shimmering. She wore a long traveling coat, and in her hands was a sketchbook. "I'm sorry," she said shyly. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I heard the song." Her accent was unfamiliar, soft and lilting. Aaron studied her. Not many come this far down the bank. "What brings you?" She smiled faintly. "I'm an artist. I travel to paint things that feel alive. But I've never heard water sing before." Aaron chuckled, a sound both warm and weary. "It doesn't sing for everyone." Her gaze drifted to the river. "Maybe not. But I think it remembers things. My grandmother used to say rivers carry the voices of the ones they've loved." Aaron's heart gave a small, painful twist. "Your grandmother was a wise woman," he said. The girl smiled again, but her eyes lingered on the water with an expression that felt oddly familiar, like someone remembering something just beyond reach. That night, as Aaron returned home, the melody still played faintly in his mind, but it wasn't just the river anymore. Now there was another voice woven into it, soft, uncertain, and human. A harmony he hadn't heard in 20 years. The girl returned the next morning. Aaron was mending his net beneath the old willow when he saw her approach, her boots sinking slightly into the wet soil, sketchbook pressed close to her chest. She smiled when she caught his eye, that same soft, uncertain smile he had seen yesterday. "Good morning," she said. "Back again?" Aaron asked, his voice gruff but kind. "I couldn't help it," she replied. "The river. It feels different here, like it's listening." He nodded slowly, threading the rope through the torn edge of his net. "It always listens. That's what makes it dangerous and kind at once." The girl crouched by the bank, dipping her fingers into the water. The current swirled around her hand, and she laughed, a light, clear sound that made Aaron glance up. "It's cold," she said, shaking off the droplets. "But it feels alive." "That it is," Aaron said softly. "Alive and full of memory." Over the next few days, she came again and again. She would sit on a flat stone under the willow and draw, the wind tugging at her hair as she worked. Sometimes she painted the river itself, the play of light on the surface, the reflection of clouds, and sometimes she painted Aaron, though she never told him she did. He began to grow used to her presence. She didn't talk much, and neither did he, but the silence between them was a gentle one, like two birds sharing the same branch. Eventually, she told him her name. "Clara," she said one afternoon, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Clara," Aaron repeated. "That's a good name. Sounds like light." "My mother chose it for that reason," she said, smiling faintly. "She used to tell me, be a light for what's forgotten." Aaron's gaze drifted toward the water. "Then you've come to the right place. The river remembers all the forgotten things." Clara hesitated. "Do you believe that?" He looked at her, really looked, and saw the sincerity in her question. "I do," he said simply. "It gave something back to me once. Something I thought was lost forever." That evening, when the sky turned gold and lilac, Clara heard the river sing Dot she was sketching in the fading light when the first notes came, faint, like a sigh through reeds. Her pencil froze mid-dash line dot. It wasn't a trick of wind. It was melody, tender, mournful, familiar in some deep, inexplicable way. Aaron sat nearby, humming quietly, eyes closed. The sound seemed to rise with his breath, ripple through the water, and return softer, gentler, as though the river itself were answering him. Clara felt tears sting her eyes without knowing why. The tune stirred something inside her, a memory that wasn't hers, yet felt achingly close. She whispered, "What song is that?" Aaron opened his eyes slowly. "It's hers," he said. "My wife's, Elise. The river remembers her." Clara looked out over the water, her heart beating faster. "It's beautiful," she murmured. "It feels sad but peaceful, like someone still waiting." "She was always waiting," Aaron said softly. "For me, I think, even now." Days turned into weeks. Clara's sketchbook filled with drawings, the river under sunlight, under rain, under moonlight. Each page seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, as if her art captured something invisible, the quiet hum of memory that lingered in the air. The villagers began to notice her too. Some whispered she was the one making the river sing. Others said she must be the old man's lost daughter, returned from somewhere far away. Aaron ignored the gossip. He had learned long ago that some things didn't need explaining. But deep down, he began to wonder. There was something unsettlingly familiar about Clara, the way she tilted her head when she listened, the way she touched the river, gently, reverently, like someone greeting an old friend. And once, when she smiled through the rain, Aaron swore he saw Elise, not as she had been, but as she might have been reborn in another time. He shook the thought away. Grief could play cruel tricks. One afternoon, as a storm gathered in the distance, Clara found him by the willow, staring into the water with a strange intensity. "You're worried," she said quietly. "The river changes when storms come," Aaron murmured. "It remembers too much. It stirs the old pain." Clara stepped closer. "May I ask what really happened to her?" Aaron's jaw tightened. He rarely spoke of it, not even to himself. But something in Clara's voice, gentle and genuine, made him want to answer. "She was by the river when it rose," he said at last. "A flood came down from the mountains. She tried to save the laundry she'd laid out to dry. Foolish, I told her. But she always cared too much for small things. The current took her before anyone could reach her." Clara's eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "I'm sorry." Aaron nodded slowly. "The river took her, and it gave me silence. For 20 years, until it remembered her again." Clara hesitated, then asked softly, "Do you think she's still here?" He looked at her, then back at the water. "I don't think she ever left." The air grew heavy, the clouds thick with the promise of rain. Clara said nothing more. She simply sat beside him as the first drops began to fall, sketchbook forgotten on her lap. Together they watched as the ripples danced, each one catching the fading light like messages written in water. That night, the storm broke. Thunder rolled over the valley and rain fell in sheets. Aaron stayed awake by the window, watching the river swell. He could feel it calling, restless, alive, whispering something he couldn't quite understand. And out there, in the darkness by the willow, he thought he saw her, a woman's figure, pale and shimmering, standing knee-deep in the rising water, her hair streaming like a veil, her hands lifted toward the storm. "Elise," he breathed. He stumbled to his feet, heart hammering. But when he blinked, the figure was gone. Only the willow swayed in the wind, and the river sang louder than ever, a melody that filled the night like memory come alive. The storm passed, leaving the town washed in silver light. The morning air was still and heavy, and the river ran wide and wild, glimmering beneath the pale sun. The ground near the willow was soaked, the old roots half buried in silt and fallen leaves. Clara walked there carefully, her boots sinking into the mud. She had come to check on Aaron. The wind had torn tiles from roofs and flooded the lower streets, but his little cottage stood strong. He was sitting by the window when she arrived, staring at the water with eyes that seemed somewhere far away. "You didn't sleep," she said gently. He shook his head. "The river didn't either." Clara smiled faintly, though worry flickered in her eyes. She moved toward the window, her fingers tracing the moisture on the glass. "It's strange," she whispered. "When the rain stopped last night, I thought I heard someone singing." Aaron's gaze didn't move from the river. "You did," he said quietly. "It was her." There was no tremor in his voice, only certainty. Clara didn't argue. She couldn't, because she had heard it too. A voice, soft, tender, familiar in a way that made her heart ache. Later that day, as the sky cleared, Clara wandered down to the water's edge. The river was calmer now, though bits of debris still floated on its surface, broken branches, a child's wooden toy, pieces of a fallen fence. And then something else, caught between two roots, was a glass bottle, its neck glinting in the sunlight. Curious, Clara waded into the shallows and reached for it. The bottle was sealed with an old cork, and inside she saw a roll of paper, aged yellow but still intact. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was delicate, looping, unmistakably feminine. The ink had bled in places, but the words were still legible. To my love, if the river carries this to you, forgive me for not waiting. The water called, and I followed. I could not fight it. But know this, love never drowns, it only changes shape. Wherever the river flows, I am there. Elise. Clara's breath caught. Her fingers brushed over the name again, Elise. She looked up at the river, her eyes wide with disbelief. Elise, she whispered. She wrote this before she... Her voice trailed off. The water rippled gently. As if answering her, she ran back to Aaron's cottage, her heart pounding. He was sitting where she had left him, carving a piece of driftwood absently, lost in thought. I found something, Clara said, breathless, by the willow. He looked up, startled, as she placed the damp letter in his hands. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His fingers traced the edges of the paper, trembling slightly. Then, very slowly, he unfolded it. When he saw the handwriting, his eyes filled instantly with tears. Elise, he whispered, the word breaking apart in his throat. He read every line carefully, his lips moving silently. When he finished, he sat very still, staring at the page as though afraid it would disappear. She wrote this the night she... He stopped. The river must have kept it all these years, waiting. Clara's voice was soft. It wanted to remember too. He nodded faintly. It did remember. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the sound of the river outside filled the silence, a calm, steady whisper that seemed to breathe between them. At last, Aaron turned to Clara. How did you find it? It was caught under the willow, she said, almost like it wanted me to see it. He gave her a strange look, not suspicion, but recognition. You remind me of her sometimes, he murmured, the way you listen, the way you speak to the river. Clara looked down, unsure what to say. I don't know why I came here, truly. I just felt drawn to this place, to you, to the water. Aaron nodded. The river brings who it remembers. That evening, they walked together along the bank. The world felt quiet again, the kind of quiet that follows truth. Aaron carried the bottle in his coat pocket. I used to think grief was a current, he said, watching the water flow. It pulls you under, drags you until you forget to breathe. But now I think it's a bridge. A bridge? Clara asked. Yes, he said, between the living and the memory of love. You never stop crossing it. Clara smiled faintly. That's a beautiful thought. He chuckled softly. It's the river's thought, not mine. They paused beneath the willow. The air smelled of wet earth and new beginnings. Tell me something, Aaron said suddenly. When you draw the river, what do you see? Clara hesitated. Sometimes I see faces, not clearly. Just shapes in the reflections, but they feel familiar. Maybe the river is showing you what it remembers, he said quietly. Clara turned to him. And what if it's showing you what you've forgotten? Aaron looked at her, startled by the depth in her eyes that seemed to carry a light he had known once before, in another lifetime. For a fleeting moment, he saw Elise there, not the woman he had lost, but something of her soul. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The moonlight spilled through her small window at the inn, and the sound of the river drifted in, calm and endless. She rose quietly and opened her sketchbook. Page after page, she had drawn the same thing: the river, the willow, the fisherman. But now she noticed something new. In every drawing, faint lines of light curved across the water, like threads connecting one shore to another. She hadn't drawn those consciously. They had appeared on their own, almost like the river itself had guided her hand. She closed the book and whispered to the night, "Elise, what are you trying to tell us?" Outside, the willow leaves rustled, and in the gentle current below, something shimmered, a reflection not of the moon, but of a woman's face smiling up from the depths. The next morning, Aaron found another bottle, this one near his net, but it wasn't empty. Inside was a folded scrap of paper in Clara's handwriting. It read simply, "Love never drowns, it changes shape." Maybe that's why the river brought me here. He looked toward the willow, where Clara stood waving softly down, and for the first time in many years, the old fisherman smiled. The summer that year was strange, too warm, too quiet. The sky stayed heavy with clouds that never quite broke, and the air carried that tense stillness that comes before something changes. The townspeople whispered that the river had been restless again, its current sharper, its songs louder at night. Aaron could feel it too. He would wake before dawn and listen, not to the wind or the birds, but to the deep hum that came from beneath the surface. Like a pulse running through the valley, Clara noticed it as well. Her sketches had grown darker. The river no longer a silver ribbon of peace, but a storm of blue and black strokes, as though her hands were drawing something her heart already knew. One afternoon, the sky turned the color of iron. A thick mist rolled down from the mountains, and the first drops of rain began to fall, heavy, urgent, familiar. Aaron stood by the willow, his fishing net forgotten beside him. He could smell the storm. It was the same scent as the night Elise had been taken: wet earth, lightning, and the faint sweetness of blooming lilac carried downstream. "Not again," he whispered. "Not this time." Behind him, Clara approached, clutching her sketchbook to her chest. Her eyes were wide, frightened but determined. "The water's rising," she said. "We should go back." Aaron shook his head. "No, the river's calling. It wants to return something." Clara stared at him. "You sound like her," she said softly. "Like Elise." He turned to her, startled. "How do you?" But before he could finish, thunder cracked overhead, splitting the sky open. The rain came harder, blurring everything in silver sheets. The two ran toward the willow, seeking shelter under its drooping arms. The river was no longer calm. It swelled and churned, brown and foaming, swallowing the stones along the bank. Clara shouted over the roar of water, "We should go inside." Aaron's voice broke. "I can't, not yet. She's here." And then, as lightning flashed, Clara saw it too. In the heart of the river, where the current was strongest, a figure stood. Not solid, not entirely real, but luminous. A woman of light and water, her hair floating like ribbons in the current. "Elise," Aaron gasped, stepping forward. Clara grabbed his arm. "No." But the river was rising fast, and the sound, the same haunting melody Elise had sung, echoed all around them. The willow leaves trembled as though remembering too. "Elise." He called again, voice breaking. "I'm here." The figure in the water turned, her face soft, sorrowful, full of love. And for the first time, Clara saw her clearly. It was the same face she had seen in her sketches. the same one that had appeared in her dreams since arriving in town. Elise thought the world tilted. Memories she didn't know she had flashed behind her eyes, a melody hummed by a woman in a blue dress, hands guiding hers across a piano, a voice whispering, "You are my second chance, little one." "No," Clara breathed, stumbling backward. "It can't be." Aaron turned to her, drenched and trembling. "Clara," her eyes filled with tears. "She's my mother." He froze. The rain hammered down, cold and relentless. "What did you say?" "I never knew her," Clara said, voice shaking. "I grew up with my aunt by the coast. They told me my mother died before I could remember, but her name was Elise." The truth struck like lightning. The river had not brought a stranger. It had brought back his daughter, Elise. "Had a child," Aaron whispered, the words barely audible through the storm. "She was expecting when his voice broke. "Clara, But before he could finish, the river surged. A huge wave struck the bank, tearing at the soil and pulling Clara off balance. She slipped with a cry, tumbling into the swirling current. "Clara!" Aaron shouted, plunging after her. The water was cold and wild, clawing at his legs, dragging him down. But he fought, his hands grasping, reaching until his fingers caught her wrist. "Hold on," he shouted. "I can't," she gasped, the water choking her words. "Yes, you can. The river took her once, it won't take you two." Lightning flashed again, lighting the sky in silver fire. And in that instant, the figure, Elise, appeared once more beside them, her expression serene. She reached out, her hand touching Aaron's shoulder. The current calmed, swirling softly around them. Her lips moved, though no sound came, only the whisper of wind through rain. Then she looked at Clara, her daughter, and smiled. The storm began to ease. Aaron pulled Clara toward the bank, both gasping, soaked, shaking. They collapsed beneath the willow as the river began to settle, the fury dissolving into a quiet murmur. When Aaron looked up again, the luminous figure was gone. Only the moonlight broke through the thinning clouds, dancing across the water's surface. For a long time they didn't speak. Clara leaned against his shoulder, breath unsteady. "It was her," she whispered. "She saved us," Aaron nodded, tears blending with the rain on his face. She remembered. Clara turned to him, her eyes wide and wet. All this time, she was here, watching, guiding. "She's always been the river," Aaron said softly. "I just couldn't see it until now." The river ran gently before them, calm as a heartbeat. Its voice, once mournful, now hummed like a lullaby. In its depths, something glittered. Aaron reached into the shallows and lifted a small bottle from the mud. Inside was a folded paper, new, dry, untouched by time. He opened it with trembling hands. "Love never drowns. It changes shape. It flows from one heart to another. Bring her home, Aaron, Elise." He looked at Clara, eyes full of wonder. "She wanted me to find you." Clara smiled through her tears. "And she wanted me to find you." The willow leaves dripped softly as the last of the rain faded away. Aaron and Clara sat together, side by side. As dawn began to rise over the horizon, the river shimmered in the first light, peaceful now and full of memory. Morning arrived like a slow exhale. The storm had passed, leaving behind a silver mist that clung to the river and the willow's dripping branches. Everything smelled new, earth, rain. and a faint sweetness like Lilidot. Aaron sat on the bank, his hands still raw from the struggle. Clara slept beside him, wrapped in his old coat, her face calm, peaceful. The river, once wild, now flowed with a quiet rhythm, as if it too were resting after remembering something long forgotten. He gazed out across the water. The surface shimmered with sunlight breaking through the clouds, and for a fleeting moment, he thought he saw her again, Elise, standing just beneath the current, her hand lifted in farewell. He didn't cry this time. He only smiled because now he understood the river had never stolen her. It had carried her into another kind of life, one that spoke not through words or flesh, but through echoes, rain, and memory. When Clara woke, the mist had begun to lift. She rubbed her eyes and looked at him. "Is it morning?" He nodded, offering her a piece of bread from his basket. "The storm's gone." She smiled faintly, looking at the river. "It feels different now, like it's lighter." Aaron followed her gaze. It remembered her. Clara tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He took a deep breath, the kind that comes before telling a truth long buried. "For years, I blamed this river. I thought it was cruel, that it took her from me and never looked back. But I see now that it wasn't punishment. It was a promise." Clara waited, listening. She always said water never forgets. That everything we give it, love, grief, music, it keeps, carries, and someday returns. I didn't believe her until you came. Clara's fingers tightened around her sketchbook. "I think that's why I came here," she said softly. "To find her. To find you." He nodded. "And through you, I found her again." They sat in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need to be filled. The river murmured quietly, weaving around stones and roots like a storyteller finishing its tale. Later that day, the townspeople gathered near the bridge to see the damage from the storm. The old structure still stood, barely, its wooden rails slick and glistening. But something strange had happened overnight. Hundreds of lilac had washed ashore along the banks, their white petals unbroken, floating in clusters like lanterns. The villagers called it a miracle. Aaron called it a memory. He and Clara stood side by side, watching the flowers drift. "She always loved Lily," he murmured. Clara nodded. "Then maybe she sent them." They decided to stay until sunset. Aaron brought out his old violin, the one he hadn't touched in years. The strings were rough and water-warped, but his hands still remembered their places. As though Elise's melody had been waiting inside all along, he began to play slow, tender, the same song she used to hum while mending nets or brushing her hair by the river. The notes drifted out across the water. Soft as breath, carried away by the wind. Clara sat near him, sketching quickly, her charcoal moving in rhythm with his music. She drew not just him, but the willow, the lilies, the light, all of it bound together in a kind of quiet grace. As night fell, the river reflected the stars. The air was still, and for a heartbeat, everything felt whole again. Aaron lowered the violin and looked at Clara. "You know, your mother used to dream of painting the river, not as it was, but as it felt. She said she wanted to capture the way it remembered people. Maybe that's your gift too." Clara smiled faintly. "Then I'll finish her dream." He reached into his pocket and handed her the small bottle they had found after the storm, the one with Elise's letter. "I think this belongs to you now." Clara held it carefully, eyes glistening. "I'll keep it safe." The current whispered around their feet. The moon rose high, full and white, reflecting on the river's skin like a second world. And then, just as they began to leave, something remarkable happened. A faint light shimmered beneath the surface, not lightning, not reflection, but a glow that seemed to rise from within the water itself. Slowly, a stream of silver ripples formed words, faint but visible, flowing past them. "Thank you for remembering," Clara gasped. Aaron's eyes filled with tears. Though he said nothing, they watched as the message dissolved back into the current. Carried away into the night. The next morning, the town returned to life. The children ran along the shore, chasing minnows. The fishermen repaired their nets. The market reopened. And yet everything felt subtly changed, softer, kinder. Erin walked with Clara to the willow one last time before she left for the city. She was going to study art, not in some distant place of ambition, but in the very same town where her mother had once dreamed of painting the river. "I'll come back," Clara promised. "Every year when a lily bloom." Erin smiled. "The river will be waiting. So will I." She hesitated, then asked quietly, "Will you ever forgive yourself?" He looked at the water, its calm surface rippling in the morning breeze. "I think the river already has." They embraced, a father and daughter who had found each other not through blood or time, but through the persistence of memory and the mercy of love. When Clara was gone, Aaron stayed by the willow a while longer. The world around him glowed gold in the early sun. Birds skimmed the surface of the river, dipping their wings into light. He closed his eyes and listened, and there it was again, Elise's melody, faint but unmistakable, carried by the current. He smiled, lifting his face to the sky. "You kept your promise," he whispered. "You remembered." The river shimmered in response, and a single white lily drifted toward him, bumping gently against his boot. He picked it up, placed it beside the willow's roots, and let out a breath that felt like the end of a long journey. That night, the moon rose bright over the valley. The river glowed beneath it, silver and endless, winding its way through the sleeping town, the keeper of memories, the bearer of songs, the heart that never stopped flowing. And somewhere within its depths, where light met water, a woman's laughter rippled softly. "Forever remembering, forever loved."